Hey, welcome back to I Know Business. I'm Dr. Steve Vargo, and to a lot of people listening today, they've almost certainly read something my guest has written or seen him speak, or they're familiar with some other area of his work. We have with us today Dr. Scot Morris. Dr. Morris, thanks so much for being here. And if you don't mind, for the few handful of people who might not know who you are, maybe give a little bit of background on who you are and what you've been up to.
Sure, Steve. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. I started out in a med surge practice where I worked for about 7 or 8 years, then transferred to another med surge practice for a couple of years. In the heyday of LASIK and refractive surgery and dry eye and some of the new technology that were coming out, that leveraged me into working as first a technology columnist for optometric management, and then eventually became the editor of Optometric Management, which I was in that position for about 7 or 8 years. I've been practicing at all different kinds of levels of practice over the last 25 years, as well as being a speaker, a consultant, and I've written lots of stuff. I'm currently the editor of AI and Eyecare, which is why I'm guessing we're going to have a little conversation about AI today, as well as still be in private practice and seeing some of the trends that are out there, have been out there, what trends come along and come and go. And we talk about hype curve, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit and where we are with all those things. And I kind of look at myself as my mentor, Larry Alexander, used to say, your job when you go educate is to keep people entertained and educated about what's going to change their life. And so that's been pretty much the passion of my entire career.
And I think we'll do that today. I think we'll entertain and educate. And yeah, that's exactly the topic we're going to tackle today. You've been very, um, maybe one of the, I don't know how we would describe it. I don't know where we are supposed to fit in this AI spectrum, but you've been, I think, on the leading edge of it. So that's why I wanted to draw you in and get your thoughts. That's the
Yeah, I mean,
topic.
I think that I've been an innovator in lots of stuff over the last 20, 30 years. And whether it be, I remember my residency, we had the very first NFA, which we now call OCTs. I've kind of been the leading edge of a lot of different things over my career. And I think this is probably, by this meaning artificial intelligence and augmented medical intelligence, will be probably the two biggest transformational, disruptive transformational platforms that we deal with in my professional career. I mean, I get the chance to see some really amazing, interesting technology and know that every time I see one of these, life will not be the same as it was yesterday.
You had sent me an article that you wrote recently, and at the top of the article, I'm going to quote you here. You said, "Warning." You know, we're always going to have some fun when an article starts off with warning. Warning, this article may challenge the way you think and make you uncomfortable. And I think maybe we're going to do the same thing on this podcast, but I'm good with it. So listeners, you've been warned. Scott, let's start with the big picture here. As it in regards to AI, you've taken a strong position. I mean, you have described AI as, or you, Eyecare actually is standing on the edge of a precipice. And we're going to dig into today some of the key areas that I think we both believe may be massively disrupted. But I'm curious, why are you so convinced of that? Where there's certain people that are kind of sitting on the fence, some people are skeptical. But what is it about AI that gives you some level of certainty that that will indeed be the case, that we're standing on the edge of a seismic shift?
Yeah, and I think that I'd love to have a crystal ball and say this is exactly the way it's going to go. And I don't think I have that because, right now everybody's all focused. And when I think of AI, that's a big term. That's a huge term. And right now everybody's really focused on generative AI. And I really don't think generative AI is going to have a huge effect on our business models. I think old school, I hate to call it that, as old school AI, but old school AI, which is algorithmic, machine-based learning, I think will have the biggest impact on our profession of anything that's ever happened. And there's so many different reasons, and we could spend hours going over this, and I'll try to summarize it in the time we have today. But I think it's going to change workforce. It's going to change workflow dramatically. It's going to change the way operations work. It's going to change the way consumers find us. It's going to change the way we interact with consumers. I think some affiliated technologies, when you think about how diagnostic technologies and how they're using many of the AI tools to get better at diagnosing and being able to spot trends, whether it be metabolites or whether it be physiological changes or whether it be physical changes. They're going to spot changes decades before we, even the best clinicians, could ever see them. And our roles are going to transform. And I always remember in 2004, I led the um, EHR conference. And I remember sitting up there and going, this is going to change the way our world works. I'm not sure it's going to be better or worse. It's just going to change. And that was a true statement. And I still don't know if I can say it was better or worse, but it did change the way our profession works. This, on the other hand, I think will change it in a dramatic way. And those people who are going to be innovators and lead this industry, whether it be optometry, ophthalmology, optical, this will be a really positive change for them. And the people who sit back and go, I think I'm going to wait for a decade and see, this is not a good, that's not a good strategy, simply from the standpoint that, and I use this analogy a lot in my different podcasts and that kind of stuff, is that AI will not replace anybody listening to this call, but the providers that use AI will. And I think this is probably the most monumental shift in what we do and how we do it over the next 5 to 7 years. I'd love to say next year, but the reality is not going to be next year. It's going to be in the next 5 to 7 years, and it is a downhill freight train. And I think we've got to pay attention in this industry about what's coming down the railroad tracks.
You mentioned the changes in the workforce, and if I could ask you to expand on that a bit, because that's obviously one of the biggest challenges that it's not unique to optometry, it's not unique to healthcare.
No.
It's just businesses in general are struggling with retention, with attracting good talent, payroll, and everything involved with that. So, how do you see this affecting the workforce? And I'll give you my input. I think we're aligned on this, but I'm interested in where you land with this is I don't see this either as replacing anybody. I see it very much enhancing. And I'm not naive to
Augmenting.
the augmenting, yeah. And I am not naive to the pitfalls and the challenges and the concerns. And maybe we could talk about that as well. But what I see it doing is giving doctors back the time to focus on the things they wanted to do in the first place, the reasons they got back into patient care, caring for the patient, but also just focusing on growing. In my world, consulting is a lot of practice management. And so often business owners get into the weeds on things that really take their focus off of growing the business. So this is where I see the biggest advantage is it does the things that humans don't need to
Don't
do,
want to do?
don't
Yeah,
want to do,
for
don't need to do, and we're never very good at it unless you have some unique
sure.
ability to write the greatest job ads in the world or you enjoy policy manuals. Why are, you get to a point where why are we still doing these things? So could you expand on the workforce side of this? Where do you see that changing?
Yeah, and I think going into that, Steve, augmentative is a good word for that. That's the word I'm kind of choosing to use more than anything else, is that it's going to, just as you said, allow us to do things that we don't want to do. And that might be a different answer for everybody. I personally don't have a problem with policy manuals, Steve, but I'm kind of a geek that way. But I think that, I don't think you're going to walk in and say, I'm going to get rid of anybody on your workforce, but you're going to restructure them. And if they were somebody who was answering a phone with some of the telephone chatbots that are coming out, I think that 80 to 90% of those phone calls are not going to come into your office. You're going to have people answer the 10% that are above and beyond what the chatbots can do. And humanity's getting used to that. This has been not an evolution that's unique to eye care or to medicine. This is an evolution unique to everything that we do. And it's restructuring the way all of us think as consumers about how we interact with the world. So you're going to keep maybe the same amount of staff, but they're going to be different tasks, number one. And number two is you might have different staff because it's going to be much more about communication skills and data management and thinking how to prompt algorithms and do that kind of stuff. And we're going to have to educate our staff to keep the ones we have. And we're going to be hiring maybe different staff over the time. So I think from that perspective, it will allow us as providers to do more of what we want to do and allow staff not to get caught in all that mundane task list based stuff. Because with some of the chatbots, some of the agents that are coming out, these are just things that we're not going to be doing 5 years from now that we're doing now. You won't be doing payroll. You won't be making a marketing campaign. You won't be doing advertising. You won't answer many of the phone calls. You won't be looking at business planning and going, what was my numbers and the month end and reconciliation. All of that stuff is going to go away. It will take 3 to 5 years, but I do see, I mean, I get, like I said, Steve, is I get a chance to see a lot of amazing technology with my role as an editor. And I can safely say none of that stuff for the people who are innovators and the people that are going to be on the front of the innovation curve. None of those things will be sucking up people's time. And instead, those providers are going to spend more time with patients, seeing more patients. And then that cycle just starts is if I can see, 10 or 15 more patients, those patients are coming from somewhere. Eventually, they're not coming out of just new patients, are coming from other practices. And that's where I make that statement is the people who are going to wrap their arms around these new technologies are just going to have better survivability than the ones who don't.
You made an interesting point about or the sort of the patient expectations as well. That's changing also. And so
Dramatically.
dramatically. In fact, our last podcast, when it just came out today, actually, was I called it From Amazon to Eye Exams. And it was dealing with not just that the patient expectations have evolved, because I think we hear that word a lot. We already know that. But going a step beyond that, that the patient expectations are actually being redefined by other businesses and other brands in terms of what the consumer expects in the areas of convenience and speed and immediacy. Now, I don't necessarily think that someone's going to walk into an optometrist office anytime soon and say, I expect my eye exam to be as convenient as ordering something on Amazon. Maybe, but we are being conditioned and we may get there. We may get there. I always look at my own kids. I have 2 teenagers and people have probably heard me say this before, but they don't know a world where you can't get anything they want at the touch of a button.
In 24 hours
In
or
24
less.
hours. Yeah. And so their brains have been conditioned to expect everything right now. And that's the patient of the future. And maybe it's in large degree a patient who's already here. So I think we have to consider AI too. What can it help me with? What can it take off my plate? What can it do faster and better to also be able to align with the patient of the future? Because they're not going to want to wait 3 weeks and then an extra 2 weeks for their glasses to arrive. They don't
Not at
know that
all.
world.
It's going to have to be much more automated in terms of we're an on-demand economy now, right? As I want it and I want it right now. And in medicine as a whole, we're not built that way. And we're going to have to make some changes to adapt to that because medicine and eye care being a piece of that, we're just really, really behind in terms of what people want. And we got to fix that, and I think that AI and AMI, augmented medical intelligence, those are the ways that this is coming down the pipeline, is that people are going to want it. They're going to want it now. They're going to interact with their agent on their phone. They're going to say, I want this information. And in many cases, that information may be something that they don't ever have to talk to an office for, number one. And number two, then it's going to help them schedule the best provider. And this is where we start getting in some evidence-based medicine and those types of things that'll be maybe more like 5 to 10 years down the road. But they're going to choose a provider that's the best provider for their specific condition, not necessarily the closest one. If you're in a rural area where I am, I might be the only one that fills all those roles. But if you're in a city, you might go, hey, well, I can walk one more block and have somebody that's an expert in glaucoma versus the provider I go to now. There's going to be a cart, very much using the Amazon thing, a cart of which provider is going to be best for me based on the evidence of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of patients. And maybe those doctors, and kind of moving into that next generation, maybe those doctors aren't going to be in your hometown because I was on a podcast or a review this morning of a piece of technology that absolutely blew my mind and made me realize that my patient audience is everyone in the world, regardless of language. It's not in my zip code. It is everywhere. And so I think with some of the diagnostic technologies that are coming out, some of the automated autonomous refracting systems, the autonomous slit lamp, that is the coolest technology I've seen in terms of diagnostic technology, the coolest technology I've seen my entire career. And then you start thinking about some of these automated digital imaging systems of the posterior segment. You put those three, and the reality is now I can do this. I can do an exam with you and have an interaction like you and I are having right now, Steve, with anybody in the world at any given time, in any language. That changes the dynamic of care delivery.
And it's a drastic shift, but it does seem to make sense because up to this point, we've really only had to worry about the private practice or the retailer, the other eye care practice up the road, and how are and competing with them.
Well, and I have to say, Steve, you brought this up before, and I didn't jump on it. I wanted to let you finish the thing is that, the big boys, the big fish are jumping in, Amazon, Meta, that kind of stuff. The days of, hey, we're dealing with Marchand or Luxottica or Essilor or Shamir or Zeiss or VSP or IMED, those are all such little time. They're not even minnows, they're plankton in the world that's coming down the pipeline for medicine. And so if you really think that companies like Amazon and Meta, well, I mean, we're all worried about private equity right now. Those are small potatoes. I mean, those are the minnows. The big fish, the sharks, they're coming, and they're coming for all of medicine, and they see that as an opportunity. Medicine, pharmacy, dental, you name it, they're coming.
Scott, I want to circle back to that in a minute, but I want to touch on something you've mentioned, augmented medical, a couple times. So first of all, maybe just expand on what you mean by that. But on a broader front, I think we've talked about the business side, operational. I think people understand where some things are going with that. But from a clinical perspective, you talked about evidence-based medicine. I think it is one of the more exciting aspects from a
Oh, for
clinical
sure.
standpoint, because as you pointed out, I believe in the article, we've really been limited to what we know and maybe what research we've read, right? Me in a practice, you in a practice, you're a pretty smart guy, but I think
We have an N of one.
we have
One is
one, yeah,
our education, our experience, but we have an N of one. And
yeah.
all that data that's coming in here and coming out here, that's still an N of one. And I think that there's where that's all going to change. And that's a piece of that bigger project that when I call it AMI, augmented medical intelligence, is all the different AI tools, right? And I think of AI as a huge, massive Swiss Army knife. The one that's got 500 pieces of equipment on it. That's artificial intelligence, and we're going to pick and use tools that we need as providers to augment our current knowledge, because our current knowledge is very limited. We're expected. I always think this is kind of almost surreal in the terms of expectations of all healthcare providers around the world. Is you're expected to remember everything that you learned in school, even if you didn't go to that class, number one. Number two is you're expected to be able to, as being one, much like you, Steve, as I've been on the podium, I've lectured over 1,000 hours on the podium, and I'm not sure I remember everything I taught, much less if you're sitting in the audience passively listening. Do you remember everything about every subject that you're ever supposed to know when that patient walks in the door and you're already busy, you're two staff members short, you're running behind, the last one's got you, you didn't sleep last night because the baby was up. And we're expected to be perfect every time. And that's not realistic. It's the world we live in today. It's not the world we're going to live in the next few years. Is all of this information of the world is going to be augmentative, and it is going to be with us, not just on demand, but it's going to be presented to us before we even think we need to know it. And I know that sounds like a really futuristic concept, but I know that technology exists. I have seen it. I have worked on it. It is very, very soon will be here, where you go, this patient's got this going on, and it will, through many different forms of AI that will tie together and integrate like a big puzzle piece, will present data from a predictive standpoint and go, it's likely this person has this. And it's likely based on their phenotype, genotype, genome, that this is going to be the best treatment based on a million other people worldwide that have this same type of situation. Now, there's some asterisks in there, right? There's some language model stuff and some data banks we need to get into. But the reality is, I don't think that's a decade away. I mean, I look at my student doctors that come in now and go, the way they're going to practice 10 years from now, I can't even conceptualize right now. And I think I'm pretty forward thinking in terms of the AI world. So there's a lot of changes that'll make our jobs more fun, make us more predictable, make us more efficient, make us more effective, make the experience better for patients. All those things that are betters are coming.
Do you think patients will get to a point where they expect doctors to leverage AI in a diagnosis? And if we put ourselves in the position of a patient, it's not uncommon. I mean, we hate to admit this, but it's not uncommon at all for patients to leave our offices with some healthy skepticism about what they
Oh,
just heard. There's a
and
such
they
thing as a
should.
second opinion. They do it all the time. So can you see getting to a point where patients almost expect AI to be part of the diagnosis process? And I'm curious, I heard this said once before that we could potentially get to a point where you could be held liable if you don't consult with artificial intelligence making a diagnosis. I know I'm jumping ahead a few years here, but do
Uh,
you see us getting to
I
that
think a
point?
decade from now, that's a pretty probably valid argument. You know, I was having this discussion with my son who's in law school, and he's focused on intellectual property and AI and how that works. And we were having this discussion. He goes, Dad, I just going to tell you, that's the way it's going down. If you don't use tools that allow you to have information you should have, you're going to be liable. Now, there's a lot of stuff there's a big crystal ball thing, right? That's further down the road that we have to worry about for sure. But I do see it as um, transformative in terms of the way we do things. And I think that, you know, right now I brought it up a little early and I want to quote, I don't know if anybody's ever looked at the hype curve. And I think everybody should go, you know, Google it. If that's still a word, you know, I don't Google anything anymore. I Gemini it. I've moved from you're in search to Gemini that brings it to you. Um, you know, there's my alphabet discussion. But I think if you look up hype curve and look what it has, hype curve is something where everybody gets super excited about it, goes straight up, and then the decline is almost as fast. And I think we're about halfway to a third of the way down the hype curve crash. You know, I think that now there's a lot of stuff coming out about AIs. You know, it's not meeting what we expectations. You know, if we looked at 2 years ago, the AI hype curve was we were on the steep. Everybody's got to use AI. All the corporations were getting rid of people, laying off people, and investing billions of dollars in AI. And they realized that it can't do all the things that they think it could do, but it can do a lot of things they never thought it could do. And I think that we're going to see a crash of AI even a little further over the next year or two or three. And then you're going to see kind of a stabilization as everybody goes, well, this is just the tools I'm supposed to use. And a lot of people go, well, I don't use AI. I'm like, use AI every single day. You just don't know it. If you're on Netflix, if you use Amazon, if you use Alexa, if you use your phone, if you're on Google Maps, Google Waze, you think there's some guy sitting there going, oh, well, look at, you know, I-25 is backed up today. Let me put everybody to go the other way. That's all AI driven. You know, I mean, Uber, you're using AI, everyone, unless you're living off the grid, which means you're not listening to this, you're using AI multiple times every day. Whether you recognize it or not, it's just slowing coming to medicine because medicine's usually moves at a snail's pace compared to the hair.
We could break down so many different areas, but with the time we have, I want to focus on two. And I'm going to bring us back to that warning at the beginning because it might make people uncomfortable, might make people happy. I mean, when I tell you what I'd like to talk about, scared, happy. But these are two areas that are deeply embedded in eye care. And I think when it's going to surprise nobody to suggest that a lot of ODs would say this creates extra work and doesn't always align with the kind of experience that we want to provide doctors, and that's EHR and insurance, everyone's two favorite topics. So I'd like to hit EHR because, again, you took a strong position on this, and this is fun to talk about these things. And I think I agree. I think you pointed out that today's EHRs are very static and siloed. And you proposed something that I'd like to hear more about, what you referred to as a patient-owned data model. I'm curious what that might look like and how would something like that change the doctor-patient relationship?
Yeah, these are called APHIS systems. They're adaptive personal health information systems or platforms, however you want to use that. I think that EHRs are static, siloed digital filing cabinets, right? They're non-reactive. And they got us from where we were in the 2000s to where we are in the 2020s. And they had their role and they had their place. But it is my opinion, and this is an IMO, in my opinion, EHRs have already seen the peak of their existence. And I think they're going to not do so well in the future because they're not adaptive. They really, the problem is with the EHR companies is that, and not, this isn't reserved to just eye care, this is reserved to all the medicine. And so I'm not targeting anybody in the eye care world, but the reality is EHRs, they can't go access that data because every patient didn't sign a HIPAA form with the EHR company, right? So there's a huge legal issue with sucking data out of the EHRs. And EHRs were never built to be able to be data centers. They just weren't built that way. It would take a complete new revision. Now, there's a couple new EHRs that are in, especially in eye care. There's one called Barty that they're kind of trying to bridge that gap, but they're still stuck because they consider themselves EHRs. And I think that that's going to be different. I think the systems of the future are the problems we have with access are that my data, my Scot Morris's data exists at my PCP, my eye doctor, my dentist, my endocrinologist. I don't have all these physicians, but my cardiologist, all those exist and none of them feed into each other. So how, as you're a PCP, how do you have a general picture of who I am as a human being and an individual? You don't. You just simply don't. These new systems will be where it's patient-driven, patient-controlled. Patients carry their records with them through some portal or interface, and that's a whole nother discussion, but some knowledge platform that they carry that information with them and go wherever they want. This is distributed ledger technology. This is blockchain at its finest. The future of healthcare is not, in my opinion, is not EHR. It's more of a blockchain knowledge platform than it is EHR. And it's just a disruptive evolution that I've now seen 3 companies working on those, one of them that I work on included, that is going to be the next evolution of how human data is looked at and used. That's my opinion.
That's your opinion. We'll revisit this in 5 or 10 years and we'll see. We're all this is on record, Scott. So we
That's
are going to
exactly
have
right.
a 10-year reunion and going to say, you're right, you're wrong.
That
Where do
crystal
you
ball is, I'll be 90% right. There's going to be 10% I just totally miss on for
totally
sure.
got wrong? Okay. All right. We're going 90%. Where do you see the biggest roadblocks here? Because somebody suggested once that medicine will be a little farther behind other companies, which are
That's a
probably
good one.
already, I mean, we've been trying, especially from a marketing standpoint, to collect as much data. It's out there. It's the world we live in. I know people have opinions about it and don't like it, but we have to deal with um, a lot of data security in healthcare and HIPAA and privacy. So how is that going to be impacted? Or are we just going to
Yeah,
change the
that's a great
laws? I mean, how
question.
do we get there?
I'll do them in inverted order from 3 to 1. So number 1 is the security. I'm going to make a statement here that I'm probably going to be sorry I made, but I'm going to make it anyway and say that people are always willing to give up security for ease of use. And I hate to say that, but it's true. And if it's going to make their life more convenient and easier, people are willing to sacrifice some of that. And there's going to be some fine lines right there. And I think the guardrails of what data security looks like is going to be very interesting over the next 5 to 10 years. But I know they're discussing it in law schools or doing all that kind of stuff. But also, you brought up HIPAA. I got to remember, though, when a patient has control of their own health record, HIPAA no longer applies. So there's a big challenge
Yeah.
if we go the disruptive evolutionary of these APHIS systems. HIPAA is no longer an issue because the patient chooses to share data with whoever they want to. That's their data. There's no HIPAA apply to that. It's only when providers are sharing that data that HIPAA applies. So there's number 1, or I should say number 3. number two is this, and this is human, this is just humanity. We're afraid that we're not going to be important. And that's that fear of being replaced. I'm not going to do this because it's not better than me. The reality is some of these AI tools are way better than it's already better than I'm ever going to be and have ever been already, and I still
And this
think
is the
we're,
worst version we're living in.
and this is the worst. This is the infant version, right? I mean, it's not even crawling yet. It's just laying its back going cuckoo. I mean, and as it starts to grow and evolve and age, it will be better and better. But there's that fear. And I even had to get over like, hey, it's now better than me. I trained it and it's better than me many times over. And that's a fear that as humanity, we don't want to be replaced. But I'll cite this and say, it doesn't really, we kind of talked about this in our pre-meeting a little bit. It doesn't really matter what I think or what I want. Evolution is inevitable. It's inevitable. It's coming. And so regardless if I think I don't want to participate, I am going to have to participate, or it will make me evolve one way or the other, right? So the fear of being replaced, the fear of not being important, I think that's the biggest one. And that's a human change we need to overcome. And then the number one, hands down, is the fear of change. It's called mesothesiophobia. That's my vocabulary word for the day for all of you guys. Metathesiophobia, which is the fear of change. People go, I don't want to do something different. The way I do it works. And the answer is, it used to work. And it still works. But there are more efficient, effective, economical, experiential ways to do things. And sometimes we have to put our arms around those and get over our metathesiophobia. That's the single biggest problem, obstacle we face.
Yeah.
I think all the social-political stuff and economics, and you brought up insurance, I'd love to go down that path. But I think all of that will fall by the wayside. It's the human traits of humanity to human element to human element that have to be overcome. And that's why I think that AI will never replace us. It will augment us, because we need to connect. We're social creatures. We're social beings. We're part of a tribe. Until that doesn't exist, we still need to exist.
That's exactly why I think we're fine. And so I do push back a little bit on the idea that I I think this applies to doctors and healthcare professionals. I don't know if it applies to everybody when we say that AI won't replace you. AI is going to replace some people, but I think people want connection with their doctor. When you look at surveys of what do patients really want when they go to their doctor, they value empathy and compassion and somebody who listens to them. They want to connect with somebody. They want a real human being there in the mix. So I think we're just going to be able to consolidate things better. We're going to have access to more information. It's not just going to be me interpreting this diagnostic test. I'm going to have basically all of humanity's information to
All
be
of
able
humanity.
to all of that. And so I think
And
that's all
it
the good
changes the
things.
education of how we do it, right? The skill sets we're going to need for providers of the future are not, you have to have the best memory and have the best recall. Those days are gone. Now the best providers will be the people who can create change management, can educate, can be empathetic. The skill sets we need for the providers of the future are different. I talked to a lot of the deans of the universities, and I'm like, hey, the curriculum you guys need to think about in the next 5 years is going to be 100% different than what it used to be. You're not going to need to remember the triad of Horner syndrome. That's not going to be necessary. But we are going to have to know, how do I change this person's compliance and adherence based on that specific person's lifestyle? That's a
A
different
fr-
skill set that we're not
it's
teaching right now.
and yeah, and we really need to be. A friend of mine he oversees an IT department, and he said, Steve, I'm focused much less on their knowledge of, they deal with a lot of coding. I'm much less concerned with their ongoing education around technology. It's not that it's not important, but he goes, I've been really emphasizing with them a completely different skill set, which is not come natural. I shouldn't say that. It's not usually focused on in an IT department as you think about that, but he says communication. He goes, what I think is going to help our
Absolutely.
company stand apart is not how well we can code, because he does believe that AI is going to take over a lot of that, but how well can we communicate with our clients? He says that's really where we need to be putting our emphasis. And AI can help with that too. It can help. You're right. You are not going to remember. It's called, you mentioned, what did you, the hype curve? Have you ever heard of the forgetting curve? It's that we
The
forget.
forgetting curve's not very much different. It kind of looks like this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, it's some, okay, it might be a little bit off, but I believe it was, we forget 90% of new information we're exposed to, if it's not reinforced, within 3 days, and most of it's in the first 24 hours.
I
So
like I said, my mentor, Larry Alexander, used to say, if you're going to get up and lecture for an hour, remember, they're going to remember three things by the time they leave, two things by the end of the weekend, and one thing by the end of next
yeah,
week.
yeah.
I spent how much time prepping this lecture to remember one thing by the end of next week? So make sure you know what that one thing's going to be.
Right. And how to communicate better in the exam room as well, because this is another area doctors get really, they forget that these are human beings there that we're talking to, that aren't going to remember every side effect, every medication. Eh, there's a better way to communicate, decide what you need to say in the exam room and what you need to hand them, what we need to talk
They're
about
going to
at the
have all
next
that
visit.
information. My phone's what I'm using, but they're going to have all that information on their phone. It's going to remind them when to take meds and what med to take. They're going to say, hey, whatever name of preceptor you're going to use, whatever the age is going to be used. Hey, you know, I what was this condition I had again? And it's going to show them a little video that's customized to them, live time by their agent. That technology is here right now. You guys are going to start seeing that come out in the next year. Like that is not futuristic. That is here now.
Scott, let's round this out here as we wrap this up here, back to the topic of insurance, because I alluded to that before. It's a, I don't know how we describe it. Let me just,
It's
everybody
a
knows it.
mess.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess. But you suggested AI could, people are going to wake up when we say this, dismantle a broken third party payer
Totally.
system. Expand on that, because
I think that's 10 or 15 years away. Like that's a little bit longer because obviously the third or fourth fear we have in life is greed. And I mean we're in a capitalist society, and I'm very much a capitalist, but we're in a capitalist society where money rules all things. Unfortunately it's a big driver of humanity. Um, is but I do believe that as we start having some of these APHIS systems, here's the foundation of why I make this assertion. As we start developing some of these APHIS systems that can truly track phenotype, genotype data, prescribing patterns, success results, we start developing a data trail that can teach AI in an evidence-based medicine philosophy. How soon before we have those values, right? So I think if we talked about N of one, right? Is that let's say we have a condition. I use this analogy, right? So as a provider, let's say I see 20 patients a day times 5 days a week times 50 weeks a year times 20 years. I'm going to see 100,000 patients, and that's my N of one. My career, I'm going to see 100,000 patients, ballpark, right? And the incidence rate of keratoconus, which is like 0.1%, which means I'm going to see 1,000 keratoconic patients in my life, maybe. These APIS systems are going to go, well, wait, but I see, I have 1,000 providers worldwide, and there's 81,000 providers in the US. So I'm saying just if we had 1,000 providers worldwide seeing 20 patients a day times whatever, right? So, and go through that same times 50 days a week times, or 5 days a week times 50 weeks a year. You're talking that we're going to see 100,000 patients every day by the end of the day, which means we're seeing 1,000 keratoconic patients every day and tracking every single point, not just now, but forever, as long as they're using that same APHIS or any other related APHIS system. Now, all of a sudden, you got evidence-based medicine that says treatment A better with this genotype phenotype than treatment B with that same genotype phenotype. And you start data crunching big data numbers. And now all of a sudden you can start associating value-based medicine with that. And value-based medicine, though, all of the insurance companies, they want evidence-based medicine because they don't want to say, well, I want to, this new procedure that costs 10x is not any better than the old procedure that costs 1x. They want to know that data. And they're going to spend a lot of money to get in with these APHIS systems to go, I want that data. I want to know who's abusing the system, who's doing testing they shouldn't be doing, who's prescribing things that aren't effective. And the insurance companies are going to be all over that. But what they don't realize, and this is where, you know, guys in black suits with black helicopters show up at my house tonight, is the backside of that is you're right. But when we find out that treatment A that's worth 10x has 5 times better outcomes than treatment B, insurance is going to have a tough time denying those. And we're going to be able to look at value-based medicine trends down the road and go, yeah, here we are, you're denying something. And just like you were saying, will providers be at risk if they don't use evidence-based medicine? The answer is probably insurance companies will likely be also at risk if they deny a procedure that is a better evidence and value-based treatment option just because it's more expensive, and then they're going to be at risk, right? And so I think that insurance, there's a 10% on the crystal ball. I have no idea where it's going to go, but I do see all kinds of obstacles and foxholes that I just think that 10 years from now, we're going to look back at insurance and go, it doesn't look anything like that anymore. It's going to be all different. And when data is shareable and transparent about what those things are, it's going to be really hard to hide behind the sheath of these are authorizations and eligibilities.
Scott, as we close out here, you mentioned a few times something that, and I appreciate the sort of a futuristic outlook of what things might look like. This might be 5 years away. This might be 10 years. This might be 15 years. I'm curious as we close out here, what would you say that doctors should be focused on today? Because we were talking a little bit before we hit record on this, and we agree on this. Nobody is putting this train back in the station. It's only going to get better. And a lot of things we're talking about today, they are going to seem ridiculous in a year, 2, 5 years. And it's not that we were wrong or you were wrong. It's that
It's just
technology,
evolution. Yeah.
we only know what we know today, and we don't know what's going to be new in a year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So the technology is going to keep advancing and getting better. So there's
Oh,
going to be, yeah. So I mean, I've used the example before of it's like trying to predict Uber before the internet. It's impossible, right? But these things are going to start to the possibilities are going to grow over the years. So I'm just curious as we close out here, what should doctors be focused on today to prepare for 5 years and 10 years down the road?
yeah. I think number one, open your mind to what's out there and understand that so much of what we use already is AI based. I mean, every tool you use on your phone, your smartwatch, your smart ring, your pretty soon your heads up display, your HUDs are going to be there. And we're in the eye care world, we're going to be the ones prescribing these, right? I mean, I think that eye care is at the center of the next evolution of smart devices. They're going to be here. We're going to look back at a phone 10 years from now and go, can you believe we use these 8-track tapes or CDs? Right, Steve? I know I'm a couple years older, but I remember the time I used to run with a CD player in my arm, right? Or we had our Blackberries, and that was less than 20 years ago. It's not that big of a shift. If you look at how far we've went in that period and know that it's moving much faster, I think we're going to look at nanotech. It's going to be embeddables. I think there's a lot of crazy stuff coming down the pipeline, but I think that the biggest thing is keep an open mind, educate yourself, right? And this is one of the things I'll do a little, I hope I don't get in trouble on this one, but AI and Eyecare, which is the journal that I am a co-editor for, we try to educate people like with our Real Talk podcast that say, hey, here's a knowledge bite. This is a piece of information you need to understand. You can learn all of this stuff. There's references and resources to go do that. Take an AI course, like how do I learn to prompt generative AI, right? I mean, and if you start learning generative AI, you're going to by nature learn some of the other tools like distributed ledger technology and what the different translational AIs and there's all these different concepts that if you're right now going, I don't know what you mean, you need to start taking a little bit of time, 5 minutes a day, and learn about this. Get on Gemini, get on ChatGPT, get on Claude. Learn that if you're still using search, you are now using an 8-track tape player, right? And if you're going, I don't know what an 8-track tape player is, that's my point, is that Use GPT, use Gemini, pick a service, start using it, playing with it, find out what it can do. It's not search anymore. It's having your own smart assistant to help you do things. Number one. Number two, keep an open mind when you go to a meeting or hear this or you hear a review or you're watching a podcast, or a TikTok video or a YouTube video about, hey, this new technology. Listen to it. Don't go, well, this doesn't affect me. Don't do the three things we talked about. Oh, it's going to replace me. Oh, I'm not going to change. Or, oh, it's going to cost too much. Listen and go, how might this apply? And I use the same analogy I do at every lecture. I say, what are the three biggest problems you have in your practice? I don't know what they are. They're different for every single practice. As a consultant, you go into practice and you're like, what's your three biggest problem? And, your menu is like 500 things that they might say. What are the three biggest things? And then start looking and go, what AI tools could help me with I'm not answering 90% of my phone calls. That's a big freaking problem. Or I don't know how to develop an ad for staff, right? I mean, find out what your three biggest problems are. Every one of you listening to this should know in your practice what your three biggest problems are and be working towards solving them. When you solve one, well, then you add number four becomes number three. And you kind of work through the list, but start looking at what technologies out there might be able to solve my biggest problem. And as you start listening, you're going to go, oh, this problem and this problem are really linked, and this tool is going to fix both of those problems. And you start putting this network of information together, saying there are tools out there that can make my life better and faster. They're out there, they're being developed, there's new stuff all the time. Just got to have an open mind to what's possible and what's coming. You're not going to necessarily, there's some of you are going to go buy the newest, coolest thing because you're at that 2.5% of the innovation curve. There's some of you in the wait and see. I'll wait till the leaders get that, and that's the early adopters and early majority. But I'll just tell you, if you're in the late majority going, I'm going to wait 5 years to don't, you're going to have a really tough time surviving if you're in that group.
Yeah, and you've mentioned an N of one, referring more to the clinical side, but I work closer on the practice management side, the business side. Same thing. You're in many cases. I mean, I group practice and all, but a lot of times the solo practitioners, even a partnership, you feel like it's that N of one. You look to your left and nobody's there. You look to your right, nobody's there. So lean into those resources, learn, explore. I would agree completely. One of those resources I want to give you
Way
a
to
platform
balance
here
the
is
field. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So yeah, I want to give you a chance here as we close out to mention once again the publication that you're a part of AI and Eyecare. I think you also have a podcast that's attached to that. Anything else you want to talk about before we close out here in terms of what's going? I know you got some projects going on, so we could just leave it at that as you want, or if you want to
Yeah, I'll
tease
just
anything
mention
that's
that.
coming out.
So I'll put my professional hat on for a minute and go, I have these conversations pretty much on a weekly basis with my co-hosts and lots of other hosts. It's called Real Talk. It's an audio podcast that's on every week. You can go to AIinEyecare.com and go to podcasts and you can download that. I also do a talk we do every bi-monthly talk called The Innovators, where we talk to the most innovative people in the world that are working on the AI and eye care space. Here's about some fascinating technologies about who's developing what. It blows my mind every time I talk to some of these really, really, really smart people doing some of these crazy things out there. Yeah, see, I mean, I am a developer as well, and I've been working on a knowledge platform that is one of these APHIS systems for the last 5 years. It's pretty much sucked up about 90% of my life, that when I'm not in clinic. And it's called augmented medical intelligence. I coined the phrase way before it was ever an AMA phrase. So there's some interesting technologies coming out, but definitely listen, as I'm at pretty much every meeting lecturing on AI these days. Come to the meeting, listen, ask questions, think about how this is going to change what you do, keep an open mind, watch for new stuff.
Thank you so much, Scott. I excited about the changes. I think everybody has some level of maybe a little bit of anxiety about change, which is normal, but I really honestly do foresee more good coming out of this than the negativity. I think we'll figure out our way around security issues and things like that. It's never going to be perfect, nothing is, but my gosh,
Nothing
if it
is.
could take our ability to not be so burdened and stressed and overwhelmed with all the administrative aspects of practice and be able to get back to focusing on the patient. That to me feels like such a win for both the patient and the practice as well. So thanks so much for your time. We'll see you at upcoming conventions, and we'll see you around, and maybe we'll have you back sooner than later to talk about where we're at now and see how much of this actually came to fruition.
Thank you, Steve. I look forward to the 10-year review. I look in the crystal ball and go, oh, boy, it was a big miss on that one. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Scott. We'll see you.
Have a great day, sir.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.